Hi, babes. Okay, so this one actually made me angry. Her fiance's dog mauled her 7-year-old and he blamed the kid. That's all I'm gonna say.
My fiance's dog mauled my daughter's face. He asked what she did to provoke it. I gave him back his ring at the hospital. I had been with Roland for 2 years when he asked me to marry him. He was charming, successful, and very good at saying exactly what a single mother wants to hear. He said he loved my daughter Penny like she was his own. He said he couldn't wait to be her stepfather. He said we were building a real family. I believed him. That was the version of him he offered when nothing important was being tested. Roland had a dog named King, a large mixed breed he had rescued years before we met. He treated that dog like royalty. King slept in the bed, ate expensive food, and went everywhere Roland could take him. Roland talked about King the way some people talk about children. At first I tried to see that as sweet. Then I started noticing the temper. King growled at strangers. He barked aggressively at other dogs. He snapped at a delivery driver once, and Roland blamed the driver for moving too fast. He lunged at a jogger in the park, and Roland blamed the jogger for running too close. Every time King acted dangerously, Roland had an explanation that protected the dog. When Roland suggested Penny and I move into his house before the wedding, I told him I was nervous about King. Penny was 7, small for her age, cautious, and gentle. I said I did not want to take risks with my child. Roland got defensive immediately. He said King was sweet. He said King had never actually hurt anyone. He said I was being paranoid and unfair. He insisted that if Penny respected King's space, there would be no problem. He asked me to trust him. We moved in anyway. I made strict rules for Penny. She was not allowed to approach King without permission. She was not allowed to touch his food or toys. She was not allowed to be alone with him. Penny followed every rule because she was a good kid who listened. Roland hated the rules. He said I was teaching her fear. He said dogs sense nervousness. He said they needed to bond naturally. More than once, I caught him leaving them in the same room while he stepped into the garage or outside to take calls. Every single time, I told him not to do it again. Every single time, he acted like I was overreacting. The attack happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was upstairs showering before lunch with my sister Naomi. Roland was supposed to be watching Penny in the living room. When I came downstairs 15 minutes later, I found my daughter on the floor covered in blood. King was standing over her growling while Roland yanked at his collar. Penny was screaming. There are moments when the body moves before the mind can understand anything. I remember grabbing Penny. I remember blood soaking through my shirt. I remember the sound she was making, the kind of scream that comes from pure animal terror. I remember running to the car and driving to the emergency room far too fast, praying out loud the whole way. I carried her through the hospital doors shouting for help. People moved fast after that. Doctors took her from my arms. A nurse guided me to a chair. Someone pressed towels into my hands and asked questions I could barely answer because all I could see was my child's face. Roland arrived about 30 minutes later. His first question was not whether Penny was alive. It was not how bad her injuries were. It was not what he could do. His first words were, "What did she do to provoke him?" I stared at him because I honestly thought shock had scrambled my hearing. I asked him to repeat himself. He said King did not attack without reason. He said Penny must have touched a toy, gotten too close to a food bowl, or done something that made the dog react. He said there had to be an explanation because King was not aggressive. My 7-year-old daughter was in surgery getting her face stitched back together, and he was building a defense for his dog. I asked what happened. He said he stepped outside to take a call. Just 5 minutes, he said. When he came back in, King had Penny on the ground. He pulled the dog away as fast as he could. Then, unbelievably, he said Penny should have known better by now. He said children need to learn boundaries around animals. He even said maybe my rules had made her nervous around King and somehow caused this. He was blaming my child. He was blaming me. He was defending the dog. So I took off my engagement ring and held it out to him. He looked startled, like I had done something abrupt and irrational. I told him we were done. I said my daughter was in surgery because he left her alone with a dangerous dog I had repeatedly warned him about, and his first instinct was to blame her. I said I would never marry a man who cared more about protecting an animal than protecting a child. I said Penny and I would be out of his house by the end of the week. He still tried to argue. He said I was emotional. He said I should not make permanent decisions in a crisis. That sentence ended anything that was left. I had blood dried under my fingernails, and my child was behind double doors with a surgeon, and he thought my problem was emotional instability. I pushed the ring into his hand and told him this was the clearest I had thought in 2 years. Then the surgeon came out. He explained that Penny had deep lacerations on the left side of her face, including one along her cheek and another near her jawline. There was damage near her ear. A plastic surgeon had assisted because of the location and her age. He said they were optimistic about healing, but she would need follow-up care, scar management, and likely years of emotional recovery on top of the physical healing. Years. That was the word that kept echoing in my head. Not stitches, not bandages. Years. Roland actually asked if they could confirm it was a dog bite from King's teeth pattern. I did not even look at him when I told him to get out. He hesitated until I said I would call security if he was still there when I came back from seeing my daughter. Then he left. When I saw Penny in recovery, half her face was bandaged. Her eyes were swollen from pain, fear, and medication. She looked tiny and wrecked and impossibly brave all at once. She reached for me and whispered, "Mommy?" I took her hand and said I was there. Then she asked the question that made me hate Roland in a completely new way. Did I do something bad? That question did not come from nowhere. It came from terror, pain, and the poison of having lived with a man who always said the dog's aggression was somebody else's fault. I told her no. I told her over and over that she had done nothing wrong. When she was calmer, I asked softly what happened. Her voice was thin and sleepy. She said she was watching television. Roland went outside. King came near the couch with his ball. She did not touch it. She stood up because she wanted to come find me. He growled. She got scared and tried to go around him. Then he jumped on her. That was it. No teasing. No stealing food. No grabbing toys. My daughter tried to leave a room because a dog frightened her, and the dog attacked her for moving. I stayed with Penny until she drifted back to sleep, then went into the hallway and called Naomi. I cried so hard I ended up sitting on the floor against the wall because my knees gave out. Naomi arrived with coffee, a phone charger, clean clothes, and the kind of rage only an older sister can carry with dignity. She took one look at me and said, "Where is he?" "Gone." "Good," she said, because I was ready to go to jail in this hospital. I told her everything. Roland's first question, the ring, Penny asking if she'd done something bad. Naomi's face went flat and dangerous. She said I was not speaking to him except through text, that everything needed to be documented, and that the dog had to be reported. I already knew she was right. The hospital had contacted animal control because it was a severe bite involving a child. A police officer came later that night to take a statement. I told him about King's history, the growling, the snap at the driver, the lunge at the jogger, the times I warned Roland, the times he ignored me. Roland started texting around 1 in the morning. First he said we both needed to calm down. Then he claimed he never blamed Penny, and I was twisting what he said. Then he wrote, "Animal control is asking questions. Please don't make this worse than it already is." That text told me everything. His concern was not Penny. It was containment. I took screenshots and stopped replying. Penny stayed in the hospital overnight. The next morning, a child life specialist brought coloring pages and a puppet with a little wristband, trying to make the room less frightening. Penny kept reaching for my hand every time anyone new entered. When they discharged her, I did not take her back to Roland's house. Naomi brought us to her place instead. She had already made up the guest room with fresh pajamas, stuffed animals, and snacks like we were coming for a sleepover instead of running from our own life. Later that day, Penny stood in Naomi's bathroom looking at the bandages in the mirror and asked, "Am I ugly now?" There are questions that divide a life into before and after. That was one of them. I crouched beside her and told her no, she was hurt, and hurt was not the same thing as ugly. She asked me to promise. I did, though inside I wanted to scream at the unfairness of a child needing that promise at all. The next week was a blur of antibiotics, dressings, follow-up appointments, police calls, and practical decisions made on almost no sleep. Naomi and her husband Jared helped me go back to Roland's house while Penny stayed with my mother. I texted him the time we were coming and told him if he was there I would call the police. He texted back that I was being vindictive. Then he added that King was in quarantine and confused and scared. Not one question about how Penny slept. Not one apology. Just King. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked offensively normal. Blue truck, trimmed lawn, flower pots by the porch. Ordinary things can look obscene after violence. Roland was there anyway, along with his mother. That told me he knew exactly what he was doing. His mother opened the door with a soft, sympathetic expression that did not fool me for a second. She reached toward me and called me sweetheart. I stepped back and told her not to touch me. Naomi moved closer, quiet and steady in the way that means trouble. Roland came into the hallway looking tired and offended instead of ashamed. He said he hoped we could talk like adults. I told him I was there for my things and my daughter's things. He said I was blowing this up unfairly. Naomi laughed right in his face. Then he said the dog was being handled. Penny was getting care, and he did not understand why I needed to destroy everything. Destroy everything. As if the destruction was the breakup, not my daughter getting her face torn open under his supervision. I told him plainly that Penny had been mauled in his house because he left her alone with a dog I had repeatedly warned him about. He claimed he was sorry it happened. I reminded him that his first response was to ask what she did. He insisted that was a reasonable question. That was the moment any leftover doubt died. He truly believed it was reasonable to suspect a bleeding 7-year-old child had earned what happened to her. We packed methodically, Penny's clothes, her school things, her blanket with the faded stars, her books, her toothbrush. Every object made me imagine her living in that house, trying so hard to be careful in a place that had never really been safe. When we reached the living room, I stopped. The carpet had been professionally cleaned. No stain, no trace. Somehow that enraged me more than dried blood would have. Naomi muttered, "Of course he cleaned it." Roland said defensively, "What was I supposed to do? Leave blood on the floor forever?" I spun around and asked whether he had time to hire a cleaner before he had time to ask how Penny slept. That shut him up for a few seconds. Later, when I found King's leash hanging in the closet like nothing had changed, I had to shut the door before I did something stupid with my bare hands. We were almost finished when Roland said, "You know putting King down won't fix Penny." That sentence was so grotesque it took me a moment moment to understand it. Even now, in the middle of packing up the life he helped shatter, he was lobbying for the dog. His mother joined in. She said there were specialists, trainers, rehabilitation. She called it one isolated incident and said it would be tragic to make a permanent decision in anger. Naomi stepped forward and said, with terrifying calm, that a child was going to carry scars on her face, and they were both standing there doing public relations for a dog. Roland looked at me and asked if I really wanted King euthanized. I told him the hardest truth in the room. I wanted my daughter to never again live with the possibility that what happened to her could happen to another child because a grown man refused to admit his dog was dangerous. His mother started crying on the staircase, not with grief, but with offended self-pity. Roland glared at me like I was tearing his life apart. On the porch, as we were leaving, he told me I was going to regret this. I told him no, I was going to regret trusting him. Then I got in the car and drove away. The next month was a long emergency. Penny had nightmares. She refused to enter rooms if she heard a dog bark, even on television. She did not want to go back to school. She touched the bandage on her face like the injury might still be happening. I got her into a trauma therapist and sat in waiting rooms filling out forms about sleep disruption, avoidance behaviors, and intrusive fear while trying not to vomit from rage. At the same time, Roland started his campaign. He told mutual friends the attack was tragic but complicated. He said King had been stressed. He said Penny probably cornered him by accident. He called me emotional and vindictive. His relatives followed. One aunt messaged me to say that as both a dog lover and a mother, she could see both sides. There are few sentences more infuriating than, "I can see both sides," when one side is a mauled child. Then the public comments started. Because animal control was investigating a severe attack involving a child, the matter became public record. Someone in a neighborhood group posted about a beloved rescue dog facing euthanasia after an unfortunate accident. Strangers rushed in to defend the dog they had never met. Children need boundaries. Rescues are misunderstood. Why was the child unsupervised? That last one was the only useful question, but they were asking it to protect the dog, not Penny. Naomi begged me not to read the thread. I read it anyway and ended up crying on the bathroom floor until Penny knocked on the door and asked if my stomach hurt. I opened the door, pulled her into my lap, and told her I was okay. Then she put her little hand on my shoulder and said she did not like when people made me sad. That was the moment I decided I was done being quiet. I called the investigator back. I gave every detail again. I forwarded the texts. I submitted photographs of Penny's injuries. I tracked down the delivery driver King had snapped at months earlier. He remembered and gave a statement. Naomi helped me find the jogger from the park. She gave one too. Suddenly, Roland's story about one unpredictable isolated incident did not look isolated at all. Animal control scheduled a hearing. I wore a navy blouse and no makeup because I no longer cared about seeming pleasant. I cared about being clear. Penny stayed with my mother. Roland arrived with a lawyer, his mother, and several character witnesses. He looked at me like this was some mutual conflict, like we were equals in a disagreement instead of people sitting there because his dog had changed my daughter's face. When it was my turn to speak, I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I simply told the truth. I told them I had expressed concern before moving in. I told them Roland repeatedly minimized the dog's aggression. I told them I made rules because I feared exactly this outcome. I told them he violated those rules and left Penny alone with King. I told them what Penny said in the hospital about standing up to come find me. I told them what Roland said in the waiting room. I told them about the scars, the nightmares, the therapy, and the way my 7-year-old asked if she was ugly now. The room was silent when I finished. Roland's lawyer tried to suggest Penny might have startled King while he was guarding a toy. I asked whether their best defense was really that a child deserves facial injuries because she moved wrong in a living room. He did not ask me anything else. The ruling came 2 days later. Dangerous dog classification and mandatory euthanasia because of the severity of the attack, the age of the victim, the facial injuries, and the documented prior aggression. Roland texted me within minutes. "I hope you're happy." That was the final proof of who he was. My daughter was waking up screaming from nightmares about teeth, and he still believed the central tragedy was the consequence his dog faced. I sent one last message. My daughter wakes up crying because she dreams teeth are coming for her. Do not ever contact me again. Then I blocked him everywhere. Healing was not cinematic after that. It was slow, repetitive, and brutal. Silicone scar sheets, ointment, follow-up visits, therapy, school meetings, Penny wanting me outside the bathroom door because she suddenly hated being alone. The first day she went back to school, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 40 minutes after drop-off because I could not make myself drive away. When she got out that afternoon, she told me a boy asked if a shark bit her. Before I could lose my mind, she added that another little girl had told him he was stupid. I laughed so hard I cried. That became our life. Small, brutal, brave moments. Penny learning how to say what happened without whispering. Penny meeting the therapist's office dog first through a glass door, then from across the room, then one cautious pet months later. Penny agreeing to school pictures again. Penny decorating her scar care chart with glitter butterfly stickers because, in her words, if something had to be on her face, it might as well be sparkly in spirit. For a while, the hardest hours were bedtime. That was when Penny's bravery wore off. She wanted every lamp on. She wanted the closet checked twice. She wanted me to sit beside her until she fell asleep. Then she wanted me there again if she woke after midnight. Sometimes she would would touch the side of her face and ask whether dogs could smell fear through walls. Sometimes she asked whether King was dead yet, and I had to answer carefully because no version of the truth felt appropriate for a child who still flinched at barking in commercials. Her therapist told me trauma makes the world feel permanently unsafe until the body slowly learns otherwise. So we built new routines. Lavender spray on the pillow, 3 deep breaths together, one hand on her back until her breathing settled. It was not dramatic healing, it was repetition. Safety practiced enough times that eventually her nervous system started to believe us. That was how survival looked at our house then. Ordinary rituals carrying extraordinary weight. As for Roland, I heard things. The hearing records spread. People in his orbit learned what he had said at the hospital. The version of him that looked charming and family-oriented started to crack. Women were less impressed by devoted dog dad energy when it came with blaming a mauled child. Naomi ran into one of his former co-workers about a year later and heard Roland was still insisting one incident had ruined his life. One incident. There are people who can watch the worst day of someone else's life and still place themselves at the center of it. Roland was one of them. Penny is 9 now. The scars are still there. Some days lighter, some days not. We keep going. Some days she forgets about them for hours at a time, which felt impossible in the beginning. Sometimes she still traces the line near her cheek and asks if it is getting better. I tell her yes, and so is she. Last spring, she had to do a school project about courage. Most kids chose firefighters or astronauts. Penny made a poster about herself. She glued on pictures from before and after the attack and drew a huge crooked purple heart across the top. Then she wrote, in her careful handwriting, "I was brave when I got hurt and had to heal. When she brought it home, I sat at the kitchen table and cried all over construction paper. She patted my arm and said, 'Mom, those are happy tears.' She was right, because the story I thought might destroy us did not destroy us. It changed us. It hurt us. It cost us more than I can put into one ending, but it did not get to keep us. And when I think back to that hospital waiting room, to Roland standing there with my ring in his hand while my daughter was being stitched back together, this is the part that matters most. I believed him when he said he wanted to be a family with us. But the day Penny needed him most, he showed me what kind of family he meant. One where she came second to his comfort. One where her pain could be explained away. One where even blood on the floor was not enough to make him tell the truth. So I gave him back his ring in a hospital waiting room, and it remains one of the best decisions I have ever made."
Like, no freaking way. He texted her, "I hope you're happy." After all of that? Sir, your dog ate a child's face, and you're the victim? I can't. I literally cannot with this man. Anyway, that was a lot. Love you guys. Subscribe if you haven't. Mwah. Bye.